Can you hear me, Kate? No, I can't hear her. Kate, can you hear me now? I don't know if she's going to be able to participate or not. I can see her, but...
Your mic is off, according to mine.
Oh, I can hear her. Okay, so I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
All right, it's 7 o'clock, or close there too, so let's start the Thursday, November 19th meeting of the Technical Planning Board. Before we get going, does any member of the public have any questions about planning board procedure or what we're here to do tonight or anything at all? Okay. With that, let's do a little housekeeping, consideration of the minutes. I was absent from that meeting, so Gary, I'll ask you to run through the minutes.
I ran through the minutes. The only place I see an issue is paragraph that was moved by Tony Trillo and seconded by Gary Madoff.
Oh, sorry.
Other than that, it was fine.
Did anybody else see any changes that need to be made? Can I have a motion to accept the minutes as written with the changes noted by Gary?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And I abstain. Okay, first up, White Mountain Survey, Graylawn Family Trust, boundary line adjustment, tax map 41-3-9, 19N28.
I'm Kevin Ash from White Mountain Survey and Engineering. So I'm here representing Al Graymont. A little boundary line adjustment involving 3 lots were part of the subdivision approved by the planning board and the state in 2005. This shows the existing configuration of the 3 lots. This shows the proposed configuration. My understanding is Al wants to do this basically to kind of keep this driveway on this lot, which he's going to hold on to, and he may be selling this when he has a purchase and sales agreement on this lot. So this configuration will allow him to have one dwelling here with an improved septic system existing, have a lot here with existing barn and a barn with a residence above it, and we have an approved septic system design. The location is shown on the plan. This lot does not have an approved design, but it was part of the approved subdivision plan and has state approval. All 3 lots have state subdivision approval, so we don't have to go back to the state to make this change. I think it's pretty straightforward. We tried to keep the lots almost the same size as they were, and yet still have the 2-acre upland, non-wetland soil to meet this 2-acre minimum. So, other than that, I think it's a pretty straightforward boundary line adjustment. And I'm sure we can answer any questions if you have.
Before we get going with any questions, it should be noted that we reviewed the application and the application was found to be complete. And the board should vote to assume jurisdiction over the application. Can I have a motion? So moved. Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I should also note that I had, I think, 3 questions which I emailed Jim Lyons about, and that Jim did answer. One was that the second middle lot is currently serviced by a water line off of a well on the first lot. There is no easement in place, but it does meet the requirements for well and septic to have a well. In fact, there is a well drilling company coming to drill on it fairly shortly. All of the lots can meet the well, septic, setbacks in their current configuration. Those were the questions I had.
I saw that you were concerned about the well, so I just happened to sketch a few possible locations just to show you that it would fit on there. There's plenty of room on the lot to leave that with the board. That would be of any use, but.
Thank you. Does any member of the board have any questions? All right, with that, can I have a motion to open a public session?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Does any member of the public have any questions about this? Can I have a motion to close the public session? Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Does the board have any questions? I have a motion to approve the boundary line adjustment as requested, for the application. Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Very nice development, by the way. Very clean.
Very well done.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that. We stay with it.
Looks good. When you get done with that one, why don't you go do another one?
I have a few locations for you.
All right. Next up, Town of Wolfboro, site plan review, RIB remediation measures. Tuftonboro tax map 66-2-70, Wolfboro tax map 96-13. For some background information for any member of the board who does not already know about it, but I'm sure everybody does. This is Wolfboro's rapid infiltration basin, which suffered failures due to engineering issues, which resulted in blowouts, limited use, now wetland restoration, taking some water, rerouting it back onto the Wolfboro side and back into the ground. Town of Wolfboro is doing this was submitted on doing it under RSA 674-54, which we have run into before on the library, which is an exemption for municipalities within another municipality for governmental uses with restrictions. So with that,
Dave Ford, Public Works Director, Town of Wolfboro, here representing the town, and thank you for taking the time to have us here. As you may recall, we did invite the town, Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, and Conservation Commission out to the site, and I believe I do recognize some of you that had the opportunity to go out and take a look at it. So today, what you have in front of us is the area, the plans specifically in the town of Tuftonboro, which is our western discharge area. And in that area, we're looking at how we're going to restore the area that has been damaged due to the effluent discharge area. So the plans you have are very specific to the area. The construction and specification that's gone to the next DES, they have been submitted to the Groundwater Bureau and to the Wastewater Engineering Design Review. So those plans we'll review now, we expect them to be approved hopefully within the next 30 days. The wetland applications are also a separate document that has been submitted to both conservation commissions and is also in contact now with the State Wetlands Bureau. So we have all that action going on.
Dave, will Mitch Locker be reviewing this as well?
Yes. At some point, hopefully you have for the record, I sent a letter in to the commission and maybe the rest of the boards indicating who the individuals are in each of the 4 different bureaus within New Hampshire DES. So we have Mitch Locker in the Groundwater Bureau. We have Tracy Wood, she's the head of the Wastewater Engineering Bureau. We have, what else do we have? Groundwater. Oh, the Wetlands Bureau, which is Brendan Pelletier, and Kyle Benedict is actually the one reviewing the wetlands. And then on the surface water, there's someone also reviewing that. I don't think there's a company right now, but it's in the letter. So we have all those different people from the state looking at it. So, with regards to the plan, do you want me to go over it in detail? Do you want to talk in general? I didn't, wasn't really sure how much detail, because we had the chance to walk it. And I think now I'd be more than happy to, if you want to ask questions or if you want to go through a page by page.
I think first we should go through some of the just housekeeping items on 674-54, because I want to send you back with a complete list of what we're going to need. I never like anyone to leave feeling disorganized or that they didn't get clear answers.
That might be the first time in our life. Believe it, I'm being disorganized.
So the board, obviously, before we get into too much of this, needs to decide whether Wolf Road or this constitutes a governmental use or development, development for public purposes, common governmental uses. Which I think is fairly clearly it is governmental use. But under 674-54, the question is, does this constitute a utility? Now, utilities fall outside of 674-54, and utilities, which normally be classified as electric, water, sewer, and such and so forth, under 674-54-3 falls outside of the exemption for 674-54, provided that it is transmission apparatus or distribution lines. Now, it would be Wolfborough's burden to answer the question whether this falls outside of 674-54-3 under that provision. So we would want that answered clearly. And it looks like it could be related to power lines, obviously, when you say distribution and so distribution and transmission. But it's your, obviously, Wolfborough's burden to make sure that it is. It's not clear by the RSA.
Okay, so, my assumption is you've had your attorney look at it, so you're gonna have something for me to respond to, or do I have to write everything down right now?
I would write that down. We'll have Leanne give you a bulleted list of things. Other questions that come up from this is, that would need to be answered is, how does it serve a public purpose, and is the public purpose statutorily or traditionally governmental in nature? So again, that's going to be a question for Wolford to answer as far as counsel, with their counsel. And again, whether the construction is considered a distribution line or transmission apparatus, which need to be resolved. And those are really the questions we have under 674-54. But we'll give you a bulleted list on that. The other question I had was, I've seen all of your state permits that you have, but normally when you have an industrial site like this that feeds into a stream, in most of the industries I work in, you would have a federally issued stormwater discharge permit for your roadways as well as your area and facility around it. And I didn't see any stormwater discharge permit listed.
That's correct. Though we are developing a stormwater management plan, which is separate but similar to what you're asking for, because I think the intent is we will kind of get the intent, but we're not required to do what you're asking for, which is something a little bit different, I believe. But I can ask again, let me get any specific question, and then I'll have my engineer go back to it. I was not aware that that might have been a concern, so I'll double check on that one.
Well, stormwater discharge permits are normally issued by SIC code, or standard indexing code for the industry they're in. Or you may be required to have one, but you can have an exemption from the EPA based on the fact that you don't have, there's limited exposure, called a no exposure exemption. So there's a number of ways it could be done.
It's just something that's, I'm unaware of what you're talking about, so I'll have to figure out what, I've never heard of that, so I'm quite, you said stormwater discharge permit?
Be an EPA issued stormwater discharge permit for industrial sites. So could you walk us through the rest of it now that we got the housekeeping items out of the way? Unless any other members of the board have any questions in regards to the 67450 or stormwater discharge permits. And you could very well be exempt from that stormwater discharge permit. That's obviously your burden, not the.
Oh, yeah, no, actually, good question. I just have to check into it, figure out. I'm not even, again, just wasn't familiar with that, so I'm just, we'll check it out and get back to you on all those questions, all good questions, so we'll make sure we'll get you the right answers.
Sure.
So what we did is give you, like I say, I jumped a little down there, so getting back to the set of plans, you have, I believe there's about 9 plans or so of a bigger set and a specification, which will be part of the DS review and what we'll be doing for bidding. Again, a lot of the details are not too interesting. If you get to plan sheet 3 of 27, and that's the site plan. And in it, you can see, if you were on site there, up to the top left of the drawing, there's the paved road that goes up to the RIBs. All the work we're talking about is below the RIBs, and it's really in the areas that have been saturated by the flow and or have been damaged. The areas that, if you're on site, these are the areas we talked about. So on the left-hand side also, you can see the town line. So as you come in the gravel road and you take a left up towards the gate of the paved road, that's where the town line starts, and it kind of runs parallel with the paved access road going up to the top. The left side is what we call the western discharge area, and that's the area that's in the town of Tuftonboro. And that's the land that we did purchase from the Whitten Family Trust 2 years ago. In this area, you can see the existing topography is the dashed lines that are lighter, and the darker colors are the proposed grade. And the red lines are the interceptor trenches. So the concept is to collect the groundwater in soils that can handle the transmission of the flows that are coming down. Catch it before it gets to the soils that cannot handle that quantity of water, because it starts to back up and it starts to look at preferred alternatives. It starts to follow the roots and pop out of the ground, or if there was a skidder trail, it popped out of that. So what we need to do is we're collecting it down in the ground in a trench with stone, and then it's going to go to the green line, which is the transmission line. The black dots are manholes in which we will collect, and the second line down, red line, is the lower trench, and that also goes into a manhole, and there we're going to have the ability to control how much water we're taking out. We want to be careful and not drain the wetland. We want to allow enough water so that the wetland can be maintained and be sustainable. But so we're going to be watching that. We'll have the ability to take as much out and kind of watch that. So those lower ones will be controlled. On the uphill side, you see the grading lines and it looks like the cross hatching. That's the extent of the stone blanket or a blanket drain, so that if any of the water leaks out, we'll have a way to collect it. And then on top of that, we'll have a geogrid and soil, and there'll be a established grass slope. Those transmission lines will be taken down to a flow control structure. And from there, we'll have the ability to discharge to 3 of the ENS systems, which are all on the Wolfboro side of the town line, and each of those systems is an exfiltration chamber. So we take it in the good soils above the wetlands, we bypass it, we monitor it to make sure we let some go through, not all of it, and then we take it and we split it up and we put it back into a exfiltration chamber in which we have a 20-foot diameter stone. In the middle, there's a 3-foot diameter concrete chamber with holes. So the water is put in and it's allowed to go out. And from there, there's a connected 10-foot wide or 1-foot thick stone. And that's what we call the burrito. It's running down from the upland area underneath the wetland area, and it comes up into the bottom of the stream. That's the work we showed in the pilot testing. We have one that's been operating now for over 2 years. We have the wetlands, soils are brought back in, the alders are brought back in, so we're very happy with the way it's looking. We've had the state out to look at it, so again, this is not something we've done in a vacuum. We try to keep everyone aware of this. So this has been going on for 4 years, the pilot testing. So that's the work, and there are some more specifics now. Below that area, we have some damaged wetlands, and that's where it gets a little. Are there any questions about the infiltration trenches and the E&S systems?
So one of the things that's central to this whole system working is controlling how much water gets diverted into the drain system and how much stays in the existing area, right?
Yes.
Now, is that going to be done with an automated system, or is this something that's monitored manually? I have no idea how sensitive, how much change there might be, or a short period of time that might require adjusting. Any real sense for that at this point?
Oh yeah, we have a very good sense, which is why we have monitoring wells, so we can watch the way the groundwater has adjusted to the flow, to when we shut the RIBs down a couple of years ago, and then we saw the recharge. We see the wells now as they're reacting to the small trenches we put in, so we can know what to expect with regards to the water table and how it's going to drop. There's a certain area there where we want to be able to keep the groundwater saturated during the growing season. So there is some ability. How much is that? We can't say exactly. Is it 555 or is it 549? It's going to have to be a watch and see to make sure it's saturated, so that during the growing season the water tables will be very close to the surface. But we don't want to see any breakout or any other type of soil movement. So it will be almost kind of a very much and it happens over time. So we'll be doing inspections and having log and doing that.
So is there real-time monitoring on those parameters from remote monitoring, say from back at your sewage treatment plant, or is it somebody comes out and checks it and logs it manually? And
So what we have, because we don't have power to the site, and we're not putting any long-term power, we have is data loggers. So we have the ability to measure the water levels in the facilities. If we had to, we could alarm them, but our intent is to be on the site quite a bit during the startup in the first year or so. In fact, we have a 3-year plan to make sure that even after construction, we want to follow up, making sure all the efforts we're going to put together with regards to the forest management plan, the wildlife habitat plan, and the stormwater plan. We're going to make sure that all is implemented. At the same time, the wetland restoration plan, which is also detailed in the following plans here. Part of that is, again, watching and monitoring that. So it will be a manual system. There'll be some data loggers, so we'll have some automation, but we will not be able to see it remotely.
So is it daily? Will somebody be there daily?
When we start up and during construction, it could be daily, but it'll never be less than weekly. So it's in between, depending on what's going on. Normally it wouldn't be on weekends, depending on what's happening with regards to, but things happen very slowly. It's not like it's, you flip a switch and all of a sudden the water shows up. It takes time, and again, we have a good feel for it, but we do have a full-time staff that's working at the facility and here, and so it will be watched, it'll be documented. So it is part of our facility, so there'll be people, doing rounds and making checks on a regular basis.
I'm guessing that based on the amounts of water that get released to the RIB, you have some feel now for the time lag in terms of between when it gets released up there and when you're gonna see some activity lower in the hill?
So that time for it to travel is a little tricky, but the initial estimates when the hydraulic model was done was that depending on the conditions, could be anywhere between 1 and 3 months. So when the water goes in above and then it comes down, what's happening is, again, if you kind of go back to, we have the ledge, and then we have 60, 70 feet of unconsolidated sand on top of that, and then we have our RABs. So when during normal years, there's no groundwater there, and then we create the groundwater, we build this mountain, the mountain starts traveling down, so it takes time for it to travel. And then, so it's really, it's getting the treatment right away. The first couple of feet is getting treated, but then there's all the storage in that big mountain. Even now, we shut it off beginning of October, so it's almost been 6 weeks, and it's still, water still coming out right now at the upper level. But it has shut down, so we're drying up now, so we have construction on the site pretty well dried up.
What capacity is the RIB operating at in comparison to what it was originally designed for?
Originally, it was permitted for 600,000 gallons a day for 365 days per year. That would have given us over 100 and I forget 60, 70 million gallons of capacity for the year. We have such since when we did our reevaluation and looked at our future flows and what the success we've had with our infiltration reduction program, we have downscaled our permit. And right now, the groundwater discharge permit is at 340,000 gallons per day. And we feel that would meet our long-term needs, but we're not going to run it at that. We're going to run it at something less than that, so that we could also continue to use our spray area. And we're going to be much more cautious and much more careful as we start up the facility upon these construction.
So what does that break down to as a percentage of what you're permitted for and what you're actually operating it as? And do you ever intend to increase what you're operating as towards where you're permitted?
Okay, 3 good questions there. So we are permitted at 340,000. We're going to get that permit again 340.
What was it originally?
600,000.
Okay, so a little over.
Our long-term needs, we feel, are at 340,000 gallons per day. We are, in the last 5-6 years, we've been only discharging a certain amount of the RABs and electric spray area. We're going to continue to do that. The question is, at some point, would we then turn off the spray area and use all the RABs? Yes, that would be within our permit.
Because your spray area is only allowed 2 inches per week of total precipitation, including spray. So what happens if you have a very wet summer or spring, and then you need to increase the amount of your discharge to the RIB?
That's what I'm saying. So we have the flexibility now. So within that permit, we do operate. We got out of 30 million gallons. Last year, this year, we got almost 37, 38 million because it was dry. So understanding what our long-term use over there, so we know how much we can get away, and we have the buffer because we have a big storage pond there, so we don't get too nervous if we have a week of rain, because usually it works itself out. But the permit will allow us to use 100% of our flow to be discharged into the RAB. And at some point, we might want to dry up the spray area for a season so we can do modifications and improvements at that site. So the answer is, yes, we might go to the full use at the site. That wouldn't get us to the capacity, but that's what our permit is. That was your question? I think I got it.
Really, it was, what the capacity of the system is now compared to what it was originally. And how do you intend to use that in conjunction with your spray fields? I think Tuftonboro would be quite happy if the spray fields, probably you would be quite happy as well, if the spray fields disappeared. But really, what's the plan? Because I assume your needs as far as water, disposing of waste are going to increase, the population increases.
No, we are projecting our wastewater flow not to increase because we still have a lot of infiltration in the system. We do not see us expanding beyond where we expanded just recently with the Harriman Hill housing. That's the last big project. We will only fill in from within. So with that projected growth and the projected decrease in infiltration, we see it being neutral for the next 20 years. With that, we still have additional 20% capacity.
So would the town of Wolfboro be willing to agree to that?
To what?
Not increasing the amount of treated wastewater they're discharging to the RIB?
Well, we're gonna be limited to the 340,000 gallons per day. That's gonna be our permit, so yes, we'll agree to that.
Right. But would they be willing to agree that in the next 20 years, they're not going to increase what they produce? In other words, we're not going to be back here doing this again in 5 years, looking for increased capacity.
I hate to speak for future generations, but right now, that is our plan, that this is a 20 to 50-year plan. Our plan is not to grow, our plan is not to have any increase. So as far as I can see, that answer is absolutely, we do not, but I don't know.
That would probably be another question to go back to the town.
Another question, Matt.
Sure.
Dave, right now, you're, excuse me, I'm gonna kill this. You're not operating right now.
We have shut the discharge, the RABs off as of October 1st.
You're not, okay. So, and
And that's because you're planning to do construction, you want things to dry up, right? In a normal year, you would run through the winter.
Yes.
Right?
And we also, in conjunction, just so I'm sorry to interrupt your question, we emptied the pond, so the pond is down to 10 million gallons, so we have 80 million gallons of capacity. So that's why we can shut everything down, sorry.
all right, so you've used your pond all summer, pretty much.
We drew it down.
You've used that, and you've used it upon evaporation this year, basically. It's evaporated or through the spray fields.
Well, a combination, evapotranspiration, spraying, and RIBs up until October 1st.
Okay, so when you go to turn this system on, all right, you still have the spray fields to rely on if you have to. You have the pond to rely on, all right? And so you're saying you're gonna do 400,000 gallons a day.
No.
Excuse me.
340.
340.
Okay, so, and I think what Matt's asking, I think, a reasonable question too. Are you gonna maintain that level and for how long? When would you increase? I think one of the questions I asked you when we were on the field trip out there was, how do you know what's coming in from whom, and what businesses in town, what homes in town? And are you limiting those people that are along those lines right now, that's it, or are you gonna expand that?
Actually, they decreased it. I mean, in all fairness, you actually did a very nice job of getting quite a bit of the,
Well, the water that was coming in,
the water, limiting the water coming in from the downtown.
And you're still working on that, right?
Correct, so when we talk about that, the infiltration into the system, back in 2005 and 2006, we were doing a total of 150 million gallons per year.
yeah.
We are down now, in the last 3 years, between 100 and 110. This year, we might even be below 100 because it's been so dry.
Is there room for more improvement there?
Yes,
How much more do you think you have?
we have projected, maybe I'm not, because of my mask, maybe I'm not hearing, but the reports that were done, and with the state, as we fill in our sewer area, we're not going to expand outside the sewer area. So within the lots that are available, and within the density that's allowed by the zoning, we have a maximum that we can expand. So we've done that calculation.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we have a goal in the next 20 years to reduce the I&I, because we still have more I&I than should be accepted. So as we upgrade our streets, we're upgrading our sewers, so we're trying to do it systematically. So we do see any growth is going to be counted by reductions in infiltration into our system. So that's why we're confident we can reduce the discharge permit from 600,000 to 340,000.
What is do you have a copy of that plan? I mean, do you have that plan all written out for your next 20 years? I mean, is that something that,
A mesh with a plan.
you said you have a plan. The plan is that you're reducing more at that end. So is this a written plan?
Yes, yes. So in terms of how we submitted it to the state, the basis of
How are you
design.
committed to the next 20 years?
Excuse me?
You said for the next 20 years.
Yes, so when we're going for state funding on this, so part of this whole project, we have to justify why we should be getting funding and loan forgiveness. So everything you just asked, we have to justify what is the 20 or 50 year cost of this? Does this make sense that we invest money? So yes, absolutely. That's in the base of the design report. I have to dig that up, but if you want to get some of that analysis, I can get that for you.
Yeah.
What's the lifespan or life expectancy of this RIB?
Well, we are looking at a minimum of 20, but I expect 50 years. So I would say right now the useful life, or we would anticipate when we develop our asset management plan, certain sections of this would have to be repaired or fixed. So we will be having budgets, and like we said, we'll be doing inspections, because nothing everything needs maintenance. You know, Mother Nature is, gonna be fine, so we have to be watching things and seeing what's going on, maintaining the grounds. There's not a lot of complicated things. I mean, there's not a lot of moving parts, so we don't know what's gonna break down, but we, again, think it's gonna last for a very, very long time.
But the system works by chemical, by bonding essentially. When you bump in wastewater or how many parts per million of phosphorus you pump into this, it's the bonding within the minerals and such and so forth in the sand that absorbs the phosphorus and makes it all disappear. So is there a system in place to determine, hey, this is used up? In other words, this is a giant septic system. It's sick.
Well, it's much more sophisticated than that, but the reality is, yes, we have, because we analyze that. So what we do is, that's a different question, because the question about the surface of the RAB is where that treatment occurs, within the first.
At a certain point, it's used up.
Yes.
All the bonds that happen that are gonna happen, and, you can dump it through, and it's just not gonna take the phosphorus.
Well, again, what we're looking at is that surface, so we've already measured where the levels of the phosphorus are. So the phosphorus going up to the facility is at 0.5 milligrams per liter, so it's very low, and it's, when it goes through, it goes down to 0.01 milligrams per liter, which we feel is the background in our background wells. And we've seen that happen within the top couple of feet. So we have now monitored that, so we will be able to take the top foot of the sand out and remove it, and then replace it with new sand when we see that there's potential for it to go any further than.
So that's how you're regenerating it, is peeling the sand out and then putting new sand in.
Yeah, we'll probably come in and mix it with some kitchens, and we'll make loam out of it somewhere.
Yeah. What you pump out of your lagoon, what's the parts per million of phosphorus on average? I'm sure it changes throughout the year that you put out of that lagoon itself.
Yeah, we got a lot of.
And does the DES have a written standard for what you're allowed to put into the RIB? In other words, do they say, no, it needs to be 0.08 parts per million or less, or is it just whatever you want to pump in there?
So we have a groundwater discharge permit, and I can get you a copy with it. Has the limits of what we're worried about, and what the groundwater permit is really measured in the groundwater at your property line. But we are actually much more cautious. Obviously, we're measuring it at the plant, at the pond, and as we put into the RIBs. So the question about the phosphorus is at 0.5 milligrams per liter, which is our average. It usually never goes much higher than that, and can go a little bit lower, but the average is 0.5 of total phosphorus.
Does your permit limit the total amount of phosphorus or parts per million that you can pump into the RIB? I know my groundwater discharge permits, they tell me what I can do, what I can put in, and what I can use for solvents and such and so forth. So does yours list that? Does it say it needs to be 0.5 or below, or does it say, hey, whatever you want to pump up there unless there's a problem there?
So our permit, our wastewater treatment, we have a monthly operating report in which we do BOD, we do suspended solids, and but we do total nitrogen and phosphorus. That's not permit requirement. We do it because we're monitoring our process. We have to know all the time, so we do report that. I do not believe the permit has a phosphorus limit of what we can discharge in, to be quite honest with you. We are obviously quite cognizant of it, and we're proud of it. But
rumor has it you guys do a very good job of keeping your phosphorus levels down on it. But, you're due to retire soon, fairly soon, I think, and the next person may not be as good at what they do as you are. So would the town of Wolfboro be willing to put a cap on the parts per million that they would discharge into the RIB? Meaning, finding, if your average is, what you said, 0.5?
Yep.
Say we will never discharge something higher than 0.7. That would be another question to go back to the town. In other words, saying this is what we will be pumping up there.
You didn't know you needed a stenographer tonight, did you?
I understand your concern, and I think we're definitely going to be in it for the long term, and I'm going to assure the community that we're going to set this facility up for success, and my successor to follow a very strict protocol and to continue being good stewards of the product. Your question is complicated because there's more than one way.
You could measure it over a period of a month, a period of a week, 5 days from here, 5 days forward back. There's more than one way to measure things.
Whether your concern is about the phosphorus showing up in the brook.
Correct.
If I put 0.8 part per, and it goes and it's all the way back down to 0.01, it really doesn't matter how much I put in here, it's really what comes out here. So if we have an upset condition and you have so we gotta be careful. The concern is, we understand the concerns, and I think
If what you discharge on average is 0.5 and we come up with a number like 0.7, then there should never be an issue.
that's not how it works, but again, we'll definitely address your question, I think.
I agree. I mean, and I absolutely understand the fact that you guys want to do a good job, and please understand the fact that our job is to make sure that what happens in the town of Tuftonboro, we act in the town's best interest. That's what we're all here to do, but we're also here to be reasonable with our neighbor town.
Sure.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Dave, go back to the monitoring plan for a second. The plan is a 3-year plan. This is a plan that is developed, or being developed by the Conservation Commission, Tuftonboro. Is that what you're referring to?
There's two things going on. We've had communications with the Conservation Commissions and meetings with them, and they wrote us a nice letter expressing their concerns and what they would like to see. I think we agreed to pretty much everything they asked for, and we want to be partners with them, and anything that you may ask for, and that's reasonable, to assure, like we say, we're good stewards, and that we develop a plan that's not just 1 year. So what FP Environmental is doing now, and what the town is paying for, they are developing a sampling and testing protocol to be independent but supplement what the town is doing. And the town on its own will continue to do not only the required testing, but additional testing.
Right.
In addition, we agreed to, in that letter, upon the funding in March, to develop the wildlife habitat plan.
So that would be a site management plan. A site management plan there, one for erosion, forestry plan, a plan for the stream itself. Okay, the stream itself is interesting because you own one side of it, we own the other. Do you ever intend to own both sides of it?
We are in negotiations with the Stockton family right now to purchase the piece in Wolfboro. In Tuftonboro, no, we do not have plans for purchasing that. I think that is shared between the Stockton family.
Okay, so you'll be developing a site management plan?
What would I agree to is just not to be a stormwater management plan, a wildlife and fish habitat plan, and a forest management plan. So we want to really look at those three distinct things that were concerns, and I think they're legitimate concerns, and especially after a large construction, we don't want to leave the site looking like it looks like now. It's not, I'm not very proud of it. It looks like
The
a
site's been
construction.
compromised, you didn't do that, but it was prior, it looks like it was, lots of trees were taken out prior to when you bought it. So that's a fix that you're gonna look at doing. What I understand is, from Tuftonboro, that the Conservation Commission would be proposing a plan to you in early December.
They're working on that right now. Yep. I met with Maggie and Steve last week out on site, and they're finishing up, I think, getting ready to recommend something to you soon.
Yeah, that's when you should see it. Okay.
Is there a reclamation plan for the site someday when this is retired? I mean, this is essentially a sand pit, and a small one, but if it was a sand pit, the state would require a reclamation plan.
Well, that's an excellent question. Usually on landfills, for instance, you would have an expected life and you would have a requirement to have a closure plan, a financial plan for closure. Quite honest with you, I don't believe that's in our permit right now, but it's something that's a reasonable request, and I think obviously we're going to be responsible forever and a day, so I don't see why we wouldn't agree to anything you would ask regarding that. But it's going to be much easier because once we're done, once we stop needing wastewater, I guess I don't know what we'll do with it, but maybe we'll, 50 years from now, maybe we'll be making drinking water right out of it, who knows?
It could be a park, who knows?
Yeah, but I do, I can't make it any more clear. It is, in fact, we had a little mix-up in our purchase sales agreement. We really want to focus on the fact that this is a positive thing for our community. I know it's, Tuftonboro and Wolfboro, but really, Wolfboro is the center of our, county with the hospital and the schools and all the restaurants. The wastewater system is integral to it, and this system is really the only thing that's close to being affordable. And again, it does provide a service for us, so hopefully, and we're trying to make sure that we'll never walk away from this. It's so important for us, just like everything dealing with our water resources also. Again, any other questions that we want to go, I got off track a little bit, I apologize. Is there anything else specifically you want to go over, or?
No, but I just reiterating what you were saying and how important this is. I mean,
I agree.
the majority of this area, you know, what economy we have is from second homes, and most of the wealth in this area is derived from this lake, which obviously this goes into. And so, I mean, if this isn't right, and this is screwed up, and 19 Mile Bay becomes a giant, you know, algae bloom, it's going to be catastrophic. So it's extremely important that this is right. So I think one of the things I noticed the most when I went up to your site was that, you know, everything you guys are doing here and everything you've done is to reduce, you know, phosphorus. And you have a giant facility that's devoted to, you know, taking the treated wastewater, which I think you guys do a very good job at. But so much of what this board does is deal with drainage controls and runoff of roads, runoff of parking lots, runoff of paved areas. And we know how important that is. So we have this giant facility that's devoted to that. But what I noticed is that there's no controls for the parking lots, roads, gravelled areas, or anything to treat the stormwater that comes off of those surfaces. So I know for a fact that from the testing we've seen, there's been virtually no difference in phosphorus levels around this facility since it's gone in. But it seems to me that the simplest way to reduce phosphorus for the town of Wolfboro, and you know what we're aiming for, is to do the relatively simple and very cheap matter of just putting in the most basic of stormwater controls for your road and parking areas and facilities you use to access this facility. So to me, that would be a question if Wolfboro would be willing to look at what they have there and come up with a very straightforward, and looks like very simple drainage plan for the road and for the parking areas, so that the stormwater that runs off of this facility and roads gets treated through the system before it goes into 19 Mile Bay Brook, which currently it just goes into 19 Mile Bay Brook.
Yes, I
I
think
think the same requirement the town of Wolfboro would require of anyone who was looking at putting in any kind of a road system or parking area or such and so forth.
Sure. Well, that's what we've committed to, and we've already contracted an engineer. The stormwater management plan is what you're talking about. So we'll have
You
our,
are doing that.
oh yeah,
Okay, wonderful.
yeah, you'll have, we'll have the commitment.
Stormwater erosion, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
And that would be in your site management plan. Yeah. Who's gonna do your work?
The engineering or construction?
Your plan over here, you know, where you're putting all this in, is the town doing it?
No, we're going out to bid. We had a pre-bid meeting today. We had 9 contractors show up, and we're very happy about that. Upon state approval of the contract documents, we'll go out to bid. I hope to have the bid numbers back in by the end of January so that we can be ready for deliberative session with the final number. So we are authorized, because this is construction, but I have these commitments on our environmental things we want to do, which is additions to this, and the engineering to oversee and testing, all that stuff. So that'll be our warrant article in March we'll vote on, and then we'll issue the contract hopefully right after March, intending on starting construction in May, and hopefully being done by the end of September. We have an administrative order by consent with New Hampshire DES to get this done by that date. They gave us already a 1-year extension. The selectmen really want this to go through. We still have some issues to go through. We're still working, again, with the Stockman family and trying to get the purchase, which is very important, and it's going to be critical to us getting our permitting. We want to make sure, hopefully, we have all issues with the town of Tuftonboro here resolved, and I think we still have some issues to discuss. I think we are committing to concerns from the Conservation Commission. The state might have some questions, although we really have had the state, we've kind of, it's been going on for 4 years, and they've been out there numerous times. I was sick of me inviting them out there. It's okay, Dave, we know the deal. Okay, let's get the plans, let's get it done now. So hopefully, we'll have that approval, and we can move forward with that schedule.
Okay.
I'm out of questions for now.
I just want to say, you've done a great job with Wolfboro. And it's quite apparent when you look at town, the things the town does. I hope they very much appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. That's very nice of you.
Dave, are you clear on the questions we have here?
Okay.
You'll get them?
Yes, every time I take my own notes, I go home and I look at
We'll have Leanne email you the bulleted list.
And if there is any attorney stuff, then I really should, I'm not an attorney, so we
No,
have to.
and we understand, and we prefer that you send it to your counsel.
Okay, good, that'd be awesome, and we'll get back to you. Do you think we should plan on coming back here, or are we all, have we met our
I think you'll need to come back. Once we have the questions answered, let's go through.
anything else? Jimmy?
I should just see if any, I do not assume jurisdiction over the application like we would on normal site plan review. There was still the question of
So we didn't have a public hearing.
574, 64. But I should ask, does anybody here have any questions? You guys have all sat here patiently and waited.
I have some comments. I'm in a butter. I have 80 acres. Back of my property line is 19 Mile Brook. My name is Ian Whitmore. I'm a member of Moose Mountains Regional Greenways Board. I'm a supervisor in the Carroll County Conservation District. So I have a high concern about conservation, especially the water quality of the stream. And I think Dave has done an excellent job. I've worked with him for 4 years in remediating the site and coming up with a plan that's going to ensure the long-term integrity of that brook. There are some very critical wildlife issues with that brook. What Dave is proposing is going to satisfy them. They center around the quality of water for brook trout. When we did the site visit, there were brook trout in evidence. It's the only native trout in the eastern U.S. And so the fact that brook trout is evidence there is an indication of the quality of work that Dave and the town of Wolfboro are doing. And as a property owner who's directly affected by that site, I'm heartened, just as you two, Matt, you spoke to earlier, the quality of the work that's going on. And from a practical point of view, I think it behooves Tufton Borough to work with Wolfboro, because if this doesn't go through, what are the alternatives? Is it a pipeline which the town of Tufton Borough will be forced to participate in because of the cost? And those costs will be huge. So to the degree that Wolfboro gets this right, the town of Tufton Borough is assured of its ability to keep its tax rate low. And I'm a little sensitive to the Tufton Borough-Wolfboro thing. As a Wolfboro resident on 19 Mile Bay, and I may be getting myself in trouble, I think the town of Tufton Borough needs to look in its own backyard. 19 Mile Bay, downstream from the RIB, forestry practices, the sand pit development, the snowmobile trail, all degrading 19 Mile Bay, 19 Mile Brook water quality. That's the responsibility of the town of Tufton Borough. You guys need to look after this. So that's all I'm saying.
Yes. I guess I'm not familiar where your property is. You're above Wolfboro on next month, correct?
No, I'm Jack Armstrong's old place.
So Tuftonboro.
No, I'm in Wolfboro.
Yeah. Okay.
Jonathan
So
Erskine.
the RID isn't affecting your property at all. Above.
Absolutely.
You're above.
I'm right across the brook from the RIB. The power line goes through my property.
And the pipes come out below you.
The power line and the
On
pipe,
our property.
and the pipes to the RIB go right through my property. I feed the RIB, so to speak.
The question that I have is that with the pond is what's gonna, you're dumping 124 million gallons of water in the pond. What's the town of Wolfboro gonna do to preserve the pond? Where my whole life, 40 years, I've been fishing down there, and since Wolfboro's been putting that water in, the pond looks awful.
So the question
And
about,
I'd like to see Wolfboro do something to preserve the pond so that it's not going.
this is Scott Clark, and son of Mary Ann Stockman and Liz Clark. So the question about Lytton Pond was raised this year. It really did look, a lot of growth was on it, but we had a lot of sunlight and very low flow. The farm pond that's there has a life, and it is now in the middle of it. It's going from a pond to a forested wetland meadow, and it's incredible transition. The depth is not very deep. It may have 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. I'm not sure how much longer it has before it's going to be nothing but one big wetland. That's just whether we're there or not there. That's the natural course of a farm pond, and the nature of the stream, because the stream is very alluvial, so there's a lot of sand. The sand is naturally continuing downstream. You blocked it up, not you, but and in the backside you can see where the alders are grown and the forests are grown, but there is a channel through there, and that's one of the confusions. We have channel and we have a very healthy brook where we have brook trout, but we also have dead zones because of the beaver activity and just how wide it is and how shallow it is. I agree with you, we do need to study it, and I'm willing to work with the Conservation Commission in terms of the watershed and whatever we can do to mitigate that. Again, I don't think there's anything specific that we have done that would have increased the natural process of eutrophication which that is going through. But again, we're more than happy to do with the studies we committed to. We want to continue to look. If there's anything we can do to help out, we'd be more than happy to help out. I think your family has been incredibly generous to the town with regards to opening that pond up for the fishing derby. They've been doing it for years, and it's really, the community loves it, and it's a good thing. So we really want to continue to try to extend that and make sure it is healthy. But I really don't know Mother Nature, how fast that is. And we are going to look at the study, but we are, again, I just can't make any commitments about
Well, my question is, it's been, okay, so say 30 years of my lifetime, it's been the same exact pond.
No, it's not.
Yeah, until the RABs moved in, and now it looks awful.
Okay, when I come back the next time, I'll show you 2 photographs. One from about, before we got there, and one from 30 years before we got there. You can see clearly the vegetation is building up in the pond. It's going through this transformation. It happens slowly, but it's changing.
So the 124 million gallons of water isn't part of this cause for it to change?
That would improve it.
No, the water we're getting is water going through. We're not adding sediment. The sediment that's coming is from the stream. You have a 2.2 square mile watershed. It's all alluvial sand. If you go upstream, you walk up the stream, you can see the sand moving. We have these beds for these oysters. Not oysters, mussels. And it's a unique system, but it's not something that you would want to put a dam on. And again, no one would ever allow me to put a dam, but that dam served its purpose for a farm at some purpose, probably for feeding cattle and whatnot. And now it's going to go through its useful life, like a lot of farms and farm ponds in New Hampshire. They're going to just be converted to wetlands. And
Well, the quality of that pond is also being affected by the way it was forested. Not, the 50-foot buffer wasn't properly recognized. There's a sand pit right on there, and there's runoff.
There's been a sand pit
into
for
the
50
pond.
years, 40 that I know of personally. 40 years my grandfather dug that out. And that pond was fine until then.
It's just.
And now all of a sudden we came in, I've got silt fence up, I've got hay bales up, there's no silt getting
It's
into
just been
it.
forested, and I've got pictures. It's just been forested last year.
Well,
All right,
And the
I think
50-foot buffer.
we've rounded the corner on that one. So Dave, you have a few questions to go back with? Thank you.
Yep, I'm going to talk to the legal questions, I think.
Yep.
I think next time I'll bring the photograph to look at the pre-condition and the real pre-condition, so we can kind of look at, because that's an important question. And I don't mean to distract, and I really am committed to studying it, because I think it's really interesting, and where it's going to go over the next, and maybe we can do something to extend its useful life. But I don't want to make anyone believe that it's ever going to come back to be a pond. That's not.
Well, I think, I forget your name, sir.
Whitmore.
Woodmore. I think his point is actually very well taken. That, when you look at the health of 19 Mile Bay, it's very easy to point at large projects, but it's really a combination of things as well. This is certainly a very large part of it, but it starts on every piece of property. Forestry is a very large part of that. And if you look at Google Earth, you know, when you go down to the 19-mile Bay Brook, it's easy to see some large parcels that have been, multiple large parcels that have been hit pretty hard.
Well, and we now have a watershed management plan that was recently completed by the Lake Water Association, and that will does provide us with a pretty good roadmap of places that we can address where we're getting pollutants into the streams and into the lake, and can serve for the town and for the residents of the town is sort of a checklist to follow in terms of making things better. And you had some huge active projects down along Winter Harbor, trying to clean up just water runoff running down.
Best management practices, just what Matt was asking for. We should have stormwater controls that show BMPs, and that's what the intent is to do with the site, so that when we're done, everything will be further book. It'll be something that we can show. This is where we want to get done. This is the BMP for a roadside ditch, infiltration trench, or a tree lot. So absolutely, we're going to continue that, what we're doing there, trying to really take it seriously, because stormwater is a major issue, and I do appreciate your comments. I do understand your concerns, and we will do our best. Again, I thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. Again, thank you. And just so if you have some more questions, again, we'll talk to you separately. If the board's all set with me, I'll take my leave, and then when we get back, we'll figure out when we can come back and discuss. Okay?
Well, Matt, I think we should continue it now to a date certain, because this was noticed as a public hearing.
Okay, motion to continue the meeting to a date certain of,
Well, December 3rd is 2 weeks. Can Mark comment on it by then? Or December 17th?
Is it open? I don't want to, again, if
let's do the one in 2 weeks.
Okay, December
Thursdays
3rd.
when you're up.
December 3rd. I'll email you.
Have a motion?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Matt, I have an invoice from LRPC.
Yes. Another one, or a?
No,
What's
it's
that?
for $2,673.50 for apparently the
Yeah,
land
the
use
budget
chapter.
committee was very excited about it.
Hmm?
I missed what we came at the last meeting because I was in quarantine, but we have contracted with MRI. They came up with a very reasonable price. $1,500 to finish it up.
Not to finish it, to
No,
analyze.
$1,500
To analyze it.
Analyze it. And from that, then they should
Yeah, then give us a quote.
Yep.
a price.
I think they said maybe 12 to 15,000.
Still a bargain.
No, it was a 12 to,
12 to 15,000.
yeah, I think,
If we go forward.
depending on what you send and what they see there, that's,
It's probably gonna be
the
less.
1,500 is what we're focused on right now, because it's really gonna tell us what we need to do, I think, and what their recommendations are,
Right.
and help us go forward. So, and I thought that was a very good price.
And one of the things that we talked about doing at the last meeting was having them redo the survey that was done bootstrapped by this board
Several,
6 years ago.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
several
Yep,
chairmans ago.
right.
Okay, so my question though is, do you just want to accept this invoice and pay it? And if so, I need a motion, or do you want to contact LRPC and ask for some type of itemization? Because $2673.50 seems excessive to have taken over 2.5 years to produce
Yeah, I'll
a
call them.
chapter that is redundant to the existing chapter.
I'll call them tomorrow and ask for an itemized bill.
Okay, so let's
No.
hold off on a vote to pay it then.
Still like that.
How much is it? $2,673.50.
And that was just for chapter 5 they worked on? We don't really know, it's not itemized, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the only thing they've been working on for 2.5 years.
Yeah,
What else would it
Exactly.
be?
Sounds good to me, I'll call him.
Do you want this?
Is it the original?
Well, the original was via email,
Oh, yeah, I'll take it.
and this is what was in the email.
Does anybody else have anything else? Motion to adjourn.
So move.
All those in favor?
Uh,
Aye.